But next, we are going to move on to a panel discussion. So I'll invite the panelists to come up now, which is Jason Lucas from our Water Management Department. He's a water management specialist, lead, and he is also the moderator of this panel. They will be discussing the irrigation best practices, and we also have Richard, now I'm gonna mess this name up, Calquhoun? From Sunshine Landscape, and Steve Olsen from Hunter Irrigation. And so please welcome them. I will let them introduce themselves because I don't have bios for everyone.
Hello, everybody. I'm Jason Lucas. I'll be moderating this panel discussion today. I'm very happy to see everybody here. I'm very elated to see everybody. On behalf of our CVWD team, I want to say thank you all. It's a great, amazing turnout today. Hopefully, this might be something that we can turn into and one up next time. So thank you again. How's everybody doing? All right, it's a home stretch, okay? So, I'm used to stadiums and arenas and stuff. So, how's everybody doing today? There you go. Not used to arenas like I present at them. It's more like I like being in that atmosphere and stuff. So we'll get right to it. I have Richard Calquhoun over here on the right, and Steve Olsen. I'll let you guys introduce yourselves.
So, Steve Olsen with Hunter Industries. I've been in the irrigation industry since birth, but professionally for 23 years, working for various manufacturers, distribution, and working with a lot of contractors and installers throughout many of those years. So,
Richard Calquhoun, I'm with Sunshine Landscape. I've been with the company for over 44 years. I'm one of the owners of the company. And I've seen a lot of change in our landscape and irrigation designs in the Coachella Valley over the last 40 years. So it's exciting, it's interesting, and there's lots of opportunities out there to enhance your properties if designed properly and maintained properly.
Absolutely.
Awesome. So a part of what I do here at the Water District, I do large landscape audits, and we call them simplified audits. My colleagues may have mentioned that earlier in an earlier presentation. So we go out there and do large landscape audits where we go out there and give recommendations, suggestions on, what things you could do to be more irrigation efficient at your communities. And I may have worked with a couple of you out there before. So I may have, it may be the first, not new to you, but for some of you that haven't done that, it's something we can look into. Now, a lot of the times when I go out to these communities and go out to these simplified audits, we come across, with landscapers that, kind of inherit the community, inherit the landscape, irrigation, the whole system is inherited. And throughout time, we got these communities that have been built 30, 40, sometimes even 50 years ago with the same infrastructure that they had in place when it got built. So, a lot throughout time, it's kind of just like putting bandages on the system. So, I guess my question to you guys and see what you guys think is, what would an irrigation upgrade look like for an HOA? I know we have, discussing those type of issues, like what would it be like preparation for the HOA? Because I know there's budgets involved in that. What would the time frame be, the cost budget type of thing? And then also, are there any new technologies as far as the irrigation industry goes that can add on and couple with that? So I guess, Richard?
Sure. Well, there are a number of new technologies that have come out in the last 10 to 15 years. Probably the single most important one is going from a mechanical clock to a solid state controller. And a lot of the controllers now actually can interface with the cloud. They can get the ET on a regular basis and make the adjustments on the fly as they're occurring. Some of them actually take about 24 hours to reset for that to occur. So sometimes you can actually have rain and you will still see water come on, but it's calculating that, and then it will determine how to draw back that amount of application water. So I think probably it's important for you to look at your controllers, see what kind of controllers that you have in your communities. And if you are not dealing with a controller that is modernized to do that type of programming for you automatically, it's important that you look into it. You're not then relying on your maintenance provider, the person that's supposed to be doing that for you, monitoring that and making those changes on the fly. I can tell you a number of the associations that we currently maintain, we have a number of them that still have controllers that do not do that. And it is so important for us to be out there on a regular basis, just making those changes manually. And it's a matter of getting the board and the landscape committee to approve those types of things. And if you look at some of the rebates that are available, as Renee was pointing out earlier today, it's not really a lot of money to do this. So if you do need that done, you should look and see what the rebates are, look and see what the controllers cost, talk to the local suppliers here, and try to figure out how you can go about getting that achieved as soon as possible. It is really, really important. In my 40 plus years of doing this, the irrigation is critical. And just getting that understanding of knowing how it affects just about every part of that landscape design. If you've got water that's coming on before you're going out there with a mowing crew, that's not a good thing. If you've got water watering for an application of temperatures that are 20 degrees warmer than what your application is putting down, that's not a good thing. So there's a lot of wasted water throughout the Coachella Valley just because people are not paying attention to that application rate on a regular basis. And when somebody asks me, like, well, how often do you adjust your irrigation at your personal house? I look at it almost every day. I mean, it doesn't sound logical, but I do, because it is that critical. And especially when we've got temperatures that we were in, the high 60s the other day, and then all of a sudden we're into the mid 80s and we're going up to 93 on Sunday. Well, you can go out and look at your grass if you still have it, and you can see that it's literally stressing out. So if you had a smart controller, you wouldn't have to do that. So obviously now you know I don't have a smart controller because I look at it every day. But it's just my one little house. So I think that's number one, your controllers. And then you get into the applications of the individual heads, the irrigation, whether they're a lawn pop-up or a shrub head, to see what kind of water those are putting out. And those are usually based on conventional heads are water. It's based on gallons per minute. Newer nozzles are based on gallons per hour. So that's a significant difference in how they apply the water. So we've done a number of conversions where we've taken conventional lawn pop-ups and we've put in the rotor heads. And they don't have the same issue with wind. I don't know if anybody's noticed it does blow out here sometimes. And that can really hurt your irrigation application because it gets blown out. It literally just doesn't put the water where it belongs. So sometimes I will ask my neighbor if he wants me to water his lawn next door, and I'll turn it on during a windy day, and he's good. So looking at the types of pop-ups that you do currently have for your lawn areas is critical. That's probably the second thing that I would personally address. And then looking at your shrub system for your planters. If you're still using overhead sprays or flood bubblers, you really should look at that and see what kind of application that you could change that over to. There's a number of different ways to do that. You can either use a netafin material that's on the surface, or you can go to a PVC class 200 pipe system where you have a head per plant on a 1/2-inch riser with a little head that emits about 1 gallon to a 1/2 gallon an hour, so that you're only putting that application at that root system of that plant. So you're not overwatering the entire surface area. So that only means that you will only have weeds growing at the base of the plant, which is the hardest place to get them removed from. But you don't have them growing everywhere else. So if you look at those three items are very important. The other thing is that what I've seen throughout the Coachella Valley for over 40 years is I see a lot of misting and fogging going on. And that's because whoever's doing the maintenance there or maintaining that irrigation system, they're not regulating the valve down, the throttle on the valve, and setting it properly. So whenever you see this like fog of water going in the air, that's absolutely wrong. That should never be occurring. That's because there's so much pressure on that head that it's creating a fogging or a misting. And think about where that water's going. Oh, it's going in the atmosphere, so it'll come back next year when it rains. But it's a waste of water as well. So looking at your irrigation, the heads that you have, and how it's being maintained and controlled is critical for saving water. And when it comes to the adjustment of heads, it's important that people are out there walking these areas and looking at the head placement and looking at the actual pattern that it's spraying on. And here again, all you have to do is walk around and you'll see heads that are supposed to be spraying lawn, spraying half the driveway or a sidewalk. And that's because there's not enough time in the day for maybe that staff to get through the entire irrigation and check it correctly. But that being said, I can tell you that there are a number of times when I've seen people adjust sprinklers, and 2 days later, they're not spraying where they were when they were actually checking it. And that's because sometimes that high pressure problem can actually turn the head as it's popping up and retracting. So as far as what's available out there now, controllers, solid state controllers that are smart controllers, heads that are rotor heads instead of just a spray head, and going to some type of a drip system, whether it's through a netafin on the surface or a head per plant using a class 200 pipe to hard pipe the lateral lines to each one of those heads, and making sure that they're put in the right place. And then the other thing is when you look at tree applications, if you've got existing lawn area and you want to remove that lawn and you have a tree in it, do not expect that tree to survive unless you do a lot of work to preserve that tree. And what we do is we actually create a netafin spiral all the way out. We start at close to the trunk of the tree and we spiral all the way out around that till we get all the way out to what we would consider the drip line on the tree. And on top of that, sometimes we even go in and leave spray heads to make sure that we have the water on the surface where those roots are, because that's where they've been getting water since their existence in that location. And you see a lot of trees that fail in new landscape designs because they're not taking in consideration how that tree has been getting its water since its existence. So if you do have these designs and you are going to remove turf, where there are trees, you have to protect the trees by getting them the amount of water that they have been used to getting. And that's one of the critical things that I see in a lot of designs where it's not happening. So, and I have to take some credit for that as well, because when we first started doing this, I think 26, 7 years ago, I guess, we weren't even thinking about it. We just said, oh, we're going to take the grass out and we're going to put in a desert scape and we're going to put in rock and do a rock design and boulders. And then the trees started to decline within a matter of just a couple of months. And some of those trees we lost because we really didn't fully understand or comprehend that those roots were still at the surface and we were not putting the water where it needed to be. So just make sure that if you do that and you are going to switch over to some type of a new irrigation design, that you do consider anything that's going to remain within that design and it gets the proper amount of water. So just talk to whoever it is that's doing your maintenance, your landscape maintenance, and most of the contractors that I know out here are very familiar with what needs to be done. And if you don't have one of those type of contractors, I know that there are a lot of them out here that can help you. So we also, and I know other companies do, provide services to help associations that may not have somebody who can do that for them. So I think that you have to just make a determination of what it is that you really want to do with your landscape for the future. And there's lots of opportunities out there, especially when you're getting $3 a square foot on turf removal. That's a lot of money that can go to those applications.
Yep. I'm glad you brought that up, Richard, because, we do have rebates for all these things that he's mentioned, cvwd.org/rebates. Just a little plug there. But, Steve, going through, after what Richard has mentioned, he mentioned a lot of things about, sprinkler heads, misting controllers, and, in your lifespan of in the career, in the industry, you've probably seen the technology, the irrigation technology grow from, this to that. Can you kind of elaborate on what, on that, on that aspect of the technology growing since
Sure.
way back when?
From the manufacturer standpoint, we create tools, right? We create tools for installers to use that kind of help meet regulations, right? So you look back 30, 40 years ago, spray heads were really inefficient. They just flood irrigated, right? You look at some of the designs back then, head-to-head coverage wasn't really a thing. And what I hear a lot, and I even heard it today, was, well, they had this 30, 40-year-old design system, and they go and use some of these high-efficient heads, right? Well, it starts showing some of the inefficiencies of that old design, right? And so the feedback I get is, hey, we used your high-efficient heads, and now we've got dry spots, this and that. And so what I say to that is, these are all tools, whether you're using a smart controller, whether you're using smart emission devices, these are tools to increase efficiency. One of the biggest things that I see that HOAs utilize that makes them successful is getting a good consultation up front, right? Like using people like Tom to say, hey, you have a 40-year-old design. Putting high efficiency heads maybe is not the answer. We need to redo some of this infrastructure. And that's where, hey, this turf removal makes more sense because you can't really make this area more efficient, right? I want to talk about technology with controllers, right? Richard mentioned solid state controllers. I haven't heard that one in a long time, but it's ever evolving. And that is one of the easiest components for your maintenance company to change out to increase the control of your system, right? But it's a marriage between your controller and your emission device. You can put in the smartest controller, but if your emission devices are horribly inefficient, you're only controlling as good as what your emission devices are, right? And that's where, again, a good consult, a good plan come in to say, hey, are we replacing emission devices first? Are we going to drip irrigation? Are we doing turf removals and then adding a smart controller? So just having that planned correctly is key to success. I want to talk about smart controllers, right? Because we use that term, but I like to kind of dig deeper into what is actually a smart controller? Now, the EPA labels a controller smart if it uses weather to self-adjust, right? Well, that's sometimes as easy as just putting a rain sensor out there, right? Well, in the middle of February, if it's not raining, it's still pretty cold, right? We don't need to irrigate that much. So a rain sensor is just going to turn it off and on, where these smart controllers nowadays are actually looking at weather, many different facets of weather to say, hey, it's February, it's 45 degrees, we only need to water 40%. It's like Richard going out every day saying, hey, I'm adjusting my run times, right? Now, we don't have the personnel or the resources to go out there and do that every day, and that's where utilizing technologies of these smart controllers comes into play, okay? A key piece that I've been seeing the last 5 years being used a whole lot more is flow sensors. These smart controllers now can utilize a whole myriad of sensors, but one key sensor is flow sensor. Had someone tell me who's a lot smarter than I, it says, you can't manage what you don't measure, right? Flow sensors are absolutely vital to having a smart system, okay? Because if you've got a broken main line, you've got broken irrigation, because our irrigation techs from any company, I don't care which company it is, they're not out there every single day, every single hour of the day. If you got a broken main line that's going 80 gallons per minute, doesn't get caught for a week, well, that can add up really quick to some fines or to higher water bills. So as you are looking into utilizing that technology, remember flow sensors. So
Awesome. Yeah, so, with the drought being over and, now, I got to keep you guys on your toes. I'm just kidding. It's late. Gotta keep you guys engaged here. No, with all the drought situation stuff that we have going on, one of the things that's still present in that is the water waste issues that we have. And when we go to HOAs and stuff, there's a lot of issues with irrigation runoff and overspray and stuff like that. So I think when I go out there and I speak to them, it's in practical terms, we can say, or not practical terms, but in the best case scenarios is do a big project and change everything, but that's not always a practical way, especially when you're dealing with budgets and HOA board approvals and stuff like that. So what would be a good place to start phasing out some of these things to kind of prevent, all this water waste that we have, because we do have fines for water waste offenses. So, maybe this, it may not be a big project, but it might be something that communities can do immediately, with a budget in mind. So what kind of things could we do as a, landscaper and as a industry person in the industry? What kind of products are there, and what kind of projects can communities do to start phasing these things out as far as water waste goes?
Turn off the water. Probably one of the simplest things to do if you're going to maintain turf areas, and turf is the #1 consumer of water, other than maybe a date palm, 210 gallons requirement on a date palm a day during the summertime. Where does it get its water from? It's a mystery, but I have to sign documents that say that I will water that when I plant a date palm on a large job, that it will get that amount of water. But turf is the #1 consumer of water, and if you still have your pop-ups right up against the back of a curb or right up against the edge of a driveway or any hardscape, one of the simplest things that you can do to help that wasteful water is to literally move that head in a minimum of 4 to 6 inches. And you say, well, but then there's going to be this brown strip that's going to be behind the head. Well, don't worry. The wind will take care of that. There's no problem there. So on a number of our projects, that's what we've done in the past to try to help eliminate that wasted water. And we do it by phases, so there's very little cost to the association. We just simply say, hey, it's winter time, there's not a lot of application of water going on, there's not a lot of water checking happening, so we figure out a way to work with our association to have our irrigator team, or our irrigator, depending on how large the property is, to just go through it street by street, block by block, whatever, and we start moving those heads in for them. So that's a simple thing. And what we try to do is we try to get them to change out the head when we do it. So if we're going to dig it up and relocate that head, it would only make sense if you can, while you're there, either replace the nozzle with a better type of a nozzle, or a completely better type of head, if it makes sense. So I would say that the easiest thing to do is to look at those turf areas, if you're not going to convert them to something other than turf, and then just make sure that you're replacing heads that aren't making the right application, like they were never really the right one. And I remember in 1979, no, I don't. I don't remember that far back. No, but in 1979, one of our first large properties that we did, we had the old brass gravity heads that just go up and down by weight of the head. So the water comes on, head pops up. I'm sure there's a few people here that remember those. One of the first things that we said is that, if they don't retract down by gravity or weight, and they're so old and there's alkaline on them, guess what we do? We mow them off. So I get to buy them, and I don't want to keep buying these heads because we know they're not going down, and they're actually not really doing the job that they were put in for. They're not spraying the same pattern anymore because of the alkaline and the corrosion on them. So we started a plan there, and we literally removed every single one of those heads in this property, and this is a large property, very large property. And we saw that not only did we stop mowing off sprinkler heads, but we were saving a tremendous amount of water because we literally were making sure that we were putting in the right amount of flow rate at each one of those locations. And so one of the largest and most important things in designing an irrigation system is making sure that you have consistency on that coverage. So if you've got a quarter head that's putting out a half a gallon an hour, and you've got a half head that's putting out a gallon an hour, and you've got a full that's putting out 2 gallons an hour, it's important that when you design it and you maintain it, that you stick with the same amount of gallons on that head that it puts out at that given time. Because if you don't, then you're going to find out that you're not getting enough water in one area, and you could be overwatering in another area. So the first thing is to make sure that you do have a good irrigation staff that's looking at the irrigation, adjusting the irrigation, changing out the irrigation to the best possible product that they can. And that's something that we've been doing now since I started. I mean, for over 40 years. And it's just a matter of, talking to your landscape chairperson or your committee or the board, and getting them to understand how important it is. It's going to save them money in the long run. There's no question about it. Water prices are going to continue to go up, and we know that water is becoming a very important commodity for this area of California. So anything that you can do is critical at this point. The sky's not falling, though.
I can't believe those brass heads still exist.
Yeah. Well, that was in 79.
No, they still exist. They're still out there. I don't know who's selling them, but they're still out there.
Yeah, they are.
So, Steve, can you touch on some of the technology that's come newer technology that can help curtail those water waste issues?
So you kind of mentioned HOAs that are on a budget, that are looking for something that's going to be impactful right away without having to use the bad words of special assessments, right? Pressure regulation. Operating equipment at the right pressure is huge. So we as manufacturers, we design nozzles and different products to work within a certain pressure range. Most installers don't check pressure. They put it in whatever street pressure is, and a lot of times it's usually on the high side here in Southern California. Do the products work? Sure. Do they work as efficiently as they could? No, right? I've seen, and I've actually done an audit myself where all we did was lower the pressure from 70 PSI at the head down to 30, and we saved them over 30%, right? So pressure regulation, whether you put that at your meters or whether that's at your valves, work with your maintenance company or have a consultant come out and say, hey, this is where pressure regulation can be installed and this is where it's going to be most impactful for your community. That's huge. Furthermore, it's going to be a cost avoidance as your infrastructure, all your main lines and whatnot, they're not being stressed out on higher pressures. It's going to prolong the life of that infrastructure as well. So pressure regulation.
Awesome. Well, I think we touched on a lot of things. I want to thank you guys, Richard and Steve, for sharing your insight and your expertise on the matter. I guess we can open it up to a couple questions, or one or two questions. 5 questions.
Richard, I have a question with your company. How often do you send out a irrigation person to review one of your projects, your HOAs? Once a month, once a week, once a year?
Well, I think we all know that if you do not check the irrigation on a weekly basis, you're going to have failure on plant material. You're just going to have it, especially in the summertime. I mean, in the summertime, they're not going to survive. What we do is we have basically most of our properties are larger communities, and we have a team that goes behind the mowing crew, and they just turn water on and check it. And if that wasn't done on a weekly basis, there would be a tremendous amount of plant loss. There just would be, especially if you're an association that's using non-potable water or lake water, because there are just so many things that can get past your Y filters and the filters in the actual nozzle, because by design, unfortunately, and I've talked to just about every manufacturer about this, and they don't seem to care what I'm saying, but well, maybe not you, but
I'm taking notes.
Yeah, but it's kind of a weird thing. So you look at the micron mesh on that nozzle, and you have to have it a certain size to allow, obviously, the water to flow through it. And you can't have it so small that every single little teeny tiny thing that gets in there is going to clog it. Now you have no water going to the actual nozzle head. But they could do a little bit better by making that micron just a little teeny bit smaller for the people that have to deal with lake water. So when it comes to how those clog, I can literally go out, check a valve, look at the shrubs, look at the spray heads, look at the bubblers, look at the emitters. It doesn't matter what it is. It's actually supposed to be delivering water to the plant, and it can work. And then I can turn it back on and look at it the next day, and it's not working because it just clogged or it just malfunctioned, whatever. So if you're not checking the water every single week on what I would consider a shrub valve that's providing water to plants, then you're going to have plant failure. And I'm personally getting really tired, because I live in Palm Desert, I'm really getting tired of driving up and down islands in Palm Desert and seeing plant failure because nobody's checking the water. That's just a fact. Yeah. And I've been, like I said, I've been doing this for 44 years, and I'm really getting tired of this. No, I'm just kidding. But I'm getting really to the point where I don't understand how we can allow real plant failure due to just not checking the irrigation on a regular basis. And so some of the plants, and Mark talked about this earlier, and we both agree on this, that we know that we're going to have certain plants that just are not going to survive. It has nothing to do with the water, people. It just doesn't. These plants won't survive any longer. We have drastic climate change. We've got high humidity, and these plants are going to fail. I don't care how much water you think you're putting on them. Remember, that humidity is causing the plant to suffocate, to drown. It has nothing to do with the water. So when they say it's burning, it's kind of a misnomer about what that really means. Google it, back check what I'm saying. Plants that are dying in the Coachella Valley, it has to do with high humidity. They're literally drowning. They can't get rid of the water, so they drowned. But when it comes to the irrigation, you have to check it every week, because the plant will not survive if you don't do it in the summertime. It won't. So as much as you may think there could be a reserve there, it doesn't. It doesn't work that way. We're in sandy soil.
I have a second question. Is there any such thing as a emitter that is rabbit control? They love to bite off the emitters.
Well, that's kind of tricky, because first off, we won't, my company, we will not do a job installation if we go with just the tube, whether it's the 1/4-inch tube or 3/8 tube, whatever size that tube is. We go with a regular 1/2-inch riser for every single emitter, and I'm not going to name any names here today on the industry side, but we go with an emitter that screws on to a 1/2-inch nipple riser, and those are usually just a little bit tougher for rodents to destroy. I mean, they can still gnaw on them and maybe deform a little bit, but that's what we try to do. We try not to use the bug emitters. And in fact, I know at one time Palm Desert wouldn't allow you to use them. I went into a meeting 20-something years ago, and I said, I won't bid this job. And they said, well, why? I go, because I'm not going to be responsible for that garbage. You're putting in something that we know is not going to work. We know it. And we've known it for 10 to 20 years. So it's critical that if you do have that problem, get away from the type of head you're using and put it on a regular riser, and that will probably solve the rodent problem.
They're bunny rabbits. Come on.
They're vicious, though. To add on to that, we've been seeing in Riverside County a kind of a transition away from using spaghetti tubing like he was talking about. And instead of going with like a rigid riser, they go with a flexible riser now with an emitter that goes on top. Basically to avoid any animal damage and any human damage, right? Because when you have a rigid riser, a mower or someone's kicking it or someone's driving over it, it breaks, right? So there are product technologies out there that are going to help mitigate that. Oh, this is going to be a good one.
Thanks. This is for Steve. I know Hunter introduced it's a subsurface irrigation system that has the netting between it that you can put under turf. I've seen a couple applications. Is that a successful product, and would you recommend that?
So what he's talking about, we have a subsurface drip tubing that actually has like a blanket that connects it. And what it does is it helps with moving the water laterally underground. Under subsurface or under turf, it absolutely works well. Out here we get some extreme heat, so you can't use that as a standalone product. Even in our recommendations, we say that you need to overhead irrigate the turf to establish it, and then you can feed it from subsurface. Well, in the middle of summers here, you're going to probably need to overhead apply water to that system. Is it a viable product out here? Yes. Does it need a little bit more engagement from maintenance staff? Absolutely.
So we're not supposed to be talking about turf here, but I can tell you there's other issues there, and those issues are: what do you do when you fertilize? What do you do when you overseed? So we would recommend putting in that blanket system. For about 90% of that time, it works great, but you still have to leave your conventional overhead sprays on because you have to overseed unless we just stop overseeding, right? Or when you fertilize. So other than that, I think Dodger Stadium did an area and they had the same issues, and they just said, well, we don't have to put as much broadcasted water out on the surface for most of the time, but there are going to be times when we will have to have that system still functional. So it works for what it's designed to do.
Yeah, stop overseeing. Oh, my mic is on.
Yeah.
So I think,
this question is for Steve. Did I understand correctly that if a community is searching to update their irrigation systems, that Hunter will actually come out and do an audit of this system and give recommendations, or did I misunderstand?
We can give you some direction. When it comes to giving you a full-scale audit and a plan, we like to leave that to people like Tom and other architects that are going to not only give you a plan, but then give you direction, maybe some construction admin. But we can give you some direction, yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Awesome. I think that's all the time we have for this panel discussion.
Yes, thank you so much to our irrigation superstars up there.
Thank you.